Next, Grant will introduce our guest.
Thank you, President Rick. Okay, this is a pretty exciting day for me because when I was elected as program chair, I'm like, oh man, who am I going to get in to kick off the year? I got to get some serious folks in here. So I met Grant probably a couple of years ago through my buddy Don over there. We were at the LA Auto Show, and we had a great time. We did dinner, went to 2 after parties. One of them was the Alcantara event that Eric Weiss was putting on. I bumped into Eric there. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I know Grant. I'm good to go." So anyway, Grant is not only a designer, inventor, a serial entrepreneur. He was listed on the SoCal Tech 50 Entrepreneurs to Watch list. He was head of design at Van Shoes, like we heard about before, for 7 years. He was a professor of Industrial Design at Art Center for 11 years. And is now, of course, as you heard, the Associate Professor and Chair of Product Innovation at the USC, Iovine Young and Academy. So, with further ado, I would like to welcome my friend Grant up to give us a great talk today. Come on up.
So Barton had 20 minutes to speak. I usually talk for about an hour, and so this is going to be a little bit challenging for me, because I do like to talk and tell stories. So, and I'm going to simultaneously go through my presentation on my own computer so I can see what I'm saying. So first of all, I just want to start by saying thank you so much for having me today. I am incredibly honored and humbled to be here, especially after Paul sent me the list of past speakers, including last week, Luke Robitaille. I told Paul, I said, so you are running out of options now? What's going on? And he said, no, trust me, it'll be fun. So anyways, as Paul mentioned, I currently teach product design at the USC Iovine Young Academy. The academy was started about 6 years ago by these 2 guys. Oh, I have to do this at the same time. So Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, otherwise Andre Young, that's where the Young comes from, thank you. They founded the school about 6 years ago, and the idea was that they wanted to educate students in the intersection of design, technology, and business and entrepreneurship. And so I was asked to come and teach product design because my background is kind of sort of intermingled with all of those aspects. So today I want to talk to you about a topic that I have quite a bit of experience with, and I kind of consider myself to be pretty good at it, and that's the F word, which is failure. So, and to put it into perspective, and to let you know that I'm serious about this, this is actually my license plate. So, I want to throw out a question to you guys. How many of you feel that failure is a bad thing? Maybe show of hands. Okay, got a couple there. How many feel that failure is a good thing? All right, good. That makes me feel a little bit better about myself. The truth of the matter is that you're all right. Failure is a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, but it also can be a very good thing. And especially when it kind of comes to this idea of what innovation is. And so, I don't know if I can claim this quote or not. I'm sure somebody's probably said this before, but with failure comes innovation. So what is failure? The dictionary definition is a lack of success. Right? So what is success? Well, success is a favorable or desired outcome. So if you kind of put it differently, really, you know what I'm doing? I'm doing this. I'm looking at my own. There we go. That's the F word that I was trying to show you, and I'm thinking that this is, okay, so that's failure, and that's my license plate. There we go. All right, thank you for reminding me about that. So I'll get you up to speed now. So we are right there, yeah. Okay, so there we go. All right, So failure is essentially a lack of a favorable or desired outcome. So I want to share with you a fun little clip that I enjoy.
Okay, that should do it.
So exciting, Larry Lewis.
Wait, but you can't hold on much longer. Everybody ready?
Go, Carl. Oh no. No, I didn't know it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You failed.
It was awesome. Exceptional.
Stand. From failing, you learn. From success, not so much.
If I gave up every time I failed, I never would have made the people get it.
I never would have made my fireproof pants.
Like my husband always says.
So that's a clip from a movie called Meet the Robinsons. It's one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you've seen it before. I'd highly recommend it. I think J.K. Rowling says it best when she states this. Good, I got it right. Failure is so important. We speak about success all the time. It's the ability to resist failure or use failure that often leads to greater success. I've met people who don't want to try for fear of failing. So, as Paul mentioned, I've done a few entrepreneurial ventures in my career. Some of them have been moderately successful, some of them not so successful. The good news is that none of them have been wildly successful, so I'm due. And so if I know you want to come and invest in whatever I do next, come see me afterwards. But I'm just kidding. I'm going to talk to you about one of my ventures. My first venture was the one where I really learned a lot about failure, and the last venture I did was this one. It's a company called URB-E, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. This was a product that I invented to address the last mile scenario for urban commuting. It's a small electric folding vehicle. I could talk to you for probably over an hour on just this one thing that I did, and all the failure that has played a role in it. But this was one of my moderately successful ventures. So this was actually founded in 2013, which was about 4 years before the whole bird and lime scooter thing happened. So I was a little bit ahead of the game there, and this was our grand opening to my family. But I want to give you some backstory. So it all began in 1995. I graduated from, that didn't work. There we go. Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. I graduated with an industrial design degree. And when I got out of school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I ended up getting a job in the footwear industry, designing athletic footwear. And I did a few things before, and then I got finally this one job. I was working for this little startup company, and it was called DVS Shoe Company. And DVS was a brand that was making very technical skateboarding shoes. These are some of the shoes that I designed there. And the interesting thing about this company was that it absolutely exploded. And I was only there for about 3.5 years, and in that time, it grew to about $40 million in yearly revenue. We actually physically moved locations 3 times in the 3.5 years I was there, and it was just a lot of fun. And I ended up getting a call from Vans, as was mentioned earlier, and they wanted me to come in, and I guess based on some of what they'd seen with DVS, they wanted me to head up design for the company. So in 2001, I took the job, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I got to do a lot of things other than just designing shoes. I entered not working? Okay. I entered a couple Red Bull soapbox races. I was, this is Team Spicoli here, in case any of you ever saw Fast Times. That's me on the right, and Steve Van Dorn is on the left there. I also entered another soapbox race in St. Louis as Soul Man. And in this race, I actually encountered my own, a different kind of failure, which I'll show you now. So I'm not going to get into all the details of what happened at Vans. I was there 7 years. What I will say is that in the 7 years I was there, and it's not all because of me, but I experienced some really great success. The company grew about 400%, went from about 250 million to $1 billion. And what was more important actually was the fact that when I started there, the brand was actually kind of looked at as a kind of a mainstream bargain brand. It wasn't the cool brand that it is today. We really wanted to kind of change the course. And so when in 2001, it was about 95% of the distribution was through mainstream big box stores. And 7 years later, we were about 70%, and this is when it was $1 billion. We were about 70% core and aspirational retail, and only about 30% of the mainstream. So that was kind of a significant change. So, I had a lot of fun, a lot of success with these two companies, and I got into a point in my career where I kind of wanted to do some other things. I was a little bit bored of designing shoes, and I was thinking to myself, what the best way to get out of the shoe industry would be to actually start a shoe company. And why I say that is I was thinking that, well, this was pretty easy, success is easy. All you need to do is have the right product, the right timing, and the right distribution, and for sure you're going to be successful. And so I thought maybe I could start the shoe company, maybe 3 or 5 years later I'd have an exit and be able to go off and do whatever I wanted to do. But what I came to find out was that I was wrong with that. So I left my job in 2008, and I founded a company called Urshuz, and I'm going to show you, oh, there I go and did it again. Keep failing. Success is easy. Right product, right time, there you go. All right, so I was wrong, okay. So this is the company that I founded in 2008. So, as you saw there, this was kind of a really radical new innovation in footwear. It was the first time this had ever been done. It was an idea that I come up with and patented, where the upper of a shoe could be mechanically attached to a sole, and therefore you could go into a store and the customer could interchange it, customize it, and do whatever they wanted to do. So whenever I showed this idea to people, they loved it, they thought it was really cool, and I was able to actually get a private equity angel investor to invest $1 million to start this company. And so we started the company in July of 2008, and we are kind of, we're thinking that this is really great. And I hear some laughing, so it's coming up. So here we go. We're going to found this company. So these are the things that I learned in my first venture, right? So timing, right? Timing is a factor. So obviously, you know what happened in, I think, around October 2008, and the day after the economy, or the stock market crashed, I got a call from my investor, and he said, you know what, Grant, I'm sorry, but I kind of lost so much money, and I'm going to have to pull out of this deal. And, sorry, okay, this time is fine. So I had to make a decision. Do I give it up? Do I try to get another job, go back to corporate, or do I kind of keep moving forward? And I had a very supportive wife. I had 3 kids at the time, which was tough. But she said, this is your dream. You need to move forward with this. And we prayed about it, and we decided that we're going to live off of our savings, and I was going to try to make this thing work. So for the next year, I funded this project, and I had prototypes made, and I was able to actually get the same investor to come back about a year later and invest. And so we were actually able to start the company at that time. The next thing that I realized, or I found out, was that you do need to spend enough time in the research and development phase of building any kind of a product. So this was a new concept, never been done before. Excuse me. And we had done some wear testing on this idea, and everything was working great. We did it for about 6 months. We had lots of orders, big retailers that I had connections to, and everything was looking great. And so we started a production run, and we got about a week into a 5-week production run. And all of a sudden I started getting phone calls and emails, and a lot of the people that were wear testing the product were telling me that these little elastic rings that hold the upper onto the sole were breaking and the shoes were falling apart. And so we didn't know what was going on, so we stopped production and kind of wanted to see if we could get to the bottom of this. And the distributor of these elastic rings had told us that the product, the material, had a 10-year shelf life. What they didn't tell us was that it had a 10-year shelf life if it was meant to be encapsulated in a tool or some kind of a covered device, not that exposed to the elements. So after about 6 months of being in UV and ozone, the material actually would go brittle. And so that was a big problem. And we had about 10 million O-rings that we had to throw away. And we basically stopped everything. We had to cancel our orders and go back to the drawing board. And it took about 12 to 18 months to get it right. And about 6 different iterations with testing along the way. And it was really, really, really painful. And so I will say that, make sure you spend enough time to make sure that everything is right there. So the third thing I learned was consumer education is key. Anytime you have a new innovation, I found this even with the URB-E product, when somebody hasn't seen something before, you have to be able to tell that story. And so once we had the product right, we then got some orders back, and one of the big accounts was Urban Outfitters, and Urban Outfitters had told us that we could put a POP display unit in the store to tell how this thing works, and that was our plan. And we had a little video monitor that was going to loop a demonstration. And about a week before the shoes were landing in the stores, all of a sudden Urban Outfitters says, "Wait a sec, you mean you want a video?" And I said, no, you can't have a video. There's no video. So, we're scrambling. We don't know what we're going to do because we aren't going to be able to show how it works. And in fact, we were trying to we wanted to talk to the employees, and they wouldn't let us talk to the employees. So even the employees didn't know what was going on. In one of the cases, they actually, because they didn't know, they actually were displaying our uppers on one side of the store and our soles on another side of the store. So, as you can imagine, it was a complete another failure. It was a total flop, and we were only there for a couple of weeks, and we were out. And so then we had to kind of re-strategize how we're going to sell the shoes without having this kind of video. But the problem was that we were now running out of money. We had spent all of our capital at this point, and because we had a track record of consistent failure, we weren't able to acquire any more capital, and eventually we just ran out of money, and the company was done. And that brings me to the fifth point, which is Murphy is a real deal. So, what's that? Oh, shit. There we go. Here, can I put them side by side? I'll just do this. Okay. So failure. I want to talk just quickly about why I think that failure is, and please tell me if I don't do this. Yeah. So why is there this connection between failure and innovation? I love this is one of my favorite quotes, Thomas Edison, if you've not seen this. I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. It's very true to my life. So failure is something that pushes the limits of what's possible. It inspires new ideas and ways to solve problems. It challenges the complacency of success. I also really like what Elon Musk has to say about this, which is failure is an option here. If things aren't failing, that means that you're not innovating enough. I find that to be very true. Now, as I mentioned earlier, failure can be bad. You don't want to have too much of it. In the case of Urshuz, going out of business is probably not a good thing. So there are ways to limit failure. Obviously, choosing right materials and being able to tell your story, things like that are obvious ones now that I've learned. But there are other ways also when you're coming out with a new product. And Bill Gates actually describes this in this quote, which is, software innovation, like almost every other kind of innovation, requires the ability to collaborate and share ideas with other people and to sit down and talk with customers and get their feedback and understand their needs. This is actually something that we use quite a bit in the design industry currently, and it's a concept that's called human-centered design. Sometimes it's also known as user-centered design. And really, essentially what human-centered design is this. It's a design and management framework that develops solutions to problems by involving the human perspective in all steps of the problem-solving process. So essentially getting consumers to get involved at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end, and vetting different ideas and prototypes and things like this. I recently came across an example that I think illustrates this quite well. The gentleman that you see here was a student, and he had an idea to design a watch that would be used for people who were blind. And he had kind of one of these epiphany moments, and he said, I'm going to design a watch that automatically tells the time using Braille. And so he then went on this mission, and he spent all these months and money and resources getting engineers to help design it. And they came up with a working prototype, and they set up a focus group of 50 blind people. And he walked in, he's all excited, and he goes to tell them what it is. And as soon as he kind of mentions what it is, someone in the audience raises their hand and says, sorry to interrupt you, but just out of curiosity, how many of us do you think know how to read Braille? And the guy kind of took a step back and he said, well, I never really looked into it. I would assume that 80 or 90% of you, if not all, know how to read Braille. And the guy responded and he said, in fact, it's actually more like 80 or 90% of us don't know how to read Braille. And the reason is that people that are blind typically have gone blind later on in life, and they don't really know how to read Braille. So, wow, this guy was pretty shocked. And the next thing that came out of it was they asked, well, is this product something that's designed just for us, or is this something that everyone would want to use? And he said, well, it's just for you. And so that was a kind of another blow to him. And so he ended up leaving, and he was really discouraged. And he says in this TED Talk, he actually threw the prototype in the trash can. And a couple days later, he gets a phone call from one of the people that were in the focus group. And he said, well, where are you at with this project? And he said, well, it's done. I failed. It's completely kaput. And the guy said, well, no, you've identified a problem. This is we do need something to solve this problem. And then the guy suggested, how about you have a few of us who are blind come and work with your engineering and design team and see what we can come up with. And so the guy agreed to do that, and lots of different iterations moving forward, they ended up coming up with this, which is actually the watch that I'm wearing today. So if you want to see it later on, I can show it to you. Oh, there we go. So it's this watch. And it's really cool because it tells the time that a regular watch would tell the time. There's an hour and a minute hand, and the hour hand is the ball bearing that runs around this channel on the outside of the watch, and the minute hand is the one on the inside. And it allows you to tell the time by touching it. It's tactile. And so not only was this a really cool solution, but they actually they did a Kickstarter campaign, and they were trying to raise $40,000, and they raised close to $600,000. And the amazing thing about it was that 95% of the people that bought the watch were actually sighted. So, so they kind of killed two birds with one stone. So I'm going to finish off with this. What I know now is never make assumptions. Involve the customer when solving problems. It's not only okay to fail, it's expected. And I would end this, I would commission all of you to do this. Fail often, and thank you, and
I can think of 1,000 questions to ask. Let's open the room here for some Q&A. Yeah, Steve.
On the Urshuz failure, is that something, I mean, you went through all the different parts of failure, but it sounds like, again, if you had the right retailer that would put the soles and the uppers together,
Yeah.
and you had a video, maybe it would take off. So do you have private equity or other people that might come back and try again?
yeah, you know, it was one of these things where we tried different, you know, we had the patents on it, worldwide patents. In fact, I think we spent about $180,000 to get these patents. And one of the, you know, after we couldn't raise the capital, we tried a lot, and it just wasn't happening. And my investor was also involved in a lot of other things, and so this was a little bit of a side project for him. And we tried to sell the concept to a couple of footwear companies and got very, very close to that. And in fact, those kind of failed right at the end there as well. So it was, you know, it was kind of one of these things. I actually kind of, you know, I made a sort of commitment. I would never start another company after that. It was like, it was that bad. And what's funny is I've now founded a few companies since. So I guess it's in my blood at this point. Yeah.
Just very quickly, you know, there's that old saw from up in Silicon Valley, fail fast and fail often.
Yes.
Okay. Do you adhere to that idea? I mean, that's a...
Yeah, I do a lot more now.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Try to come. And in fact, you know, when I said we went back and we were trying to find all those different solutions for the O-rings, we were working incredibly fast. It would take about a month of design and building the prototype, and then we would test it, and we had a facility that could replicate a year-long test within just 1 month. So we tested for 1 month, but no, it was like a 5-year test, but in 1 month. And so we would do that, and we had to do that 6 times. So yeah, we were working fast. Yeah.
How much is built in and how much is trained? Because if you look at the great innovators in the current day, many of them dropped out of college. They failed in going to college, but they highly succeeded because of their innate capabilities. So like type A, type B, different type of psychological aspects. It seems to me that maybe 80% of it is built in and maybe 10% or 20% could be trained. Is that true or not?
I think it is. I think you have to have almost this inherent sense of almost willing to take the punishment and you know, being very risk adverse. You know, I've always been kind of a risk taker, and so I think people that aren't typically attuned to taking risks would have a harder time doing this. But yeah, definitely. I had the pleasure of interviewing Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, and it was really fascinating to me because he's one of those guys that just squeaked his way through college and obviously very, very successful. And he very much agrees with this philosophy. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mike Hakeem. What are the roadblocks your students are facing? And share with us some of the great innovations they've come across.
come across or come up with?
Or come up with, I
Oh,
should say.
yeah. So, you know, we are, your first part of the question, roadblocks. You know, I think honestly, some of the roadblocks are, they take it to the limit. And so that's one thing that I'm always wanting to encourage, because, you know, the more you do and the more you fail, the more you iterate, the further you're going to be able to push your concept. As far as successes, I can give you one example. So we've only had 2 graduating classes so far. In the first graduating class, there was a group of 5 of our graduates that got together and they founded a company that made a low-cost augmented reality goggle. And they, before they graduated, they had actually started the company, and right about the time they graduated, they had secured a $7 million seed round that was led by Sequoia. And they ended up winning a Red Dot Award for it. And so they've kind of now been moving forward, and they've pivoted the company to focus more on business, B2B versus consumer model. But that's been a really cool success for us.
Yeah, fantastic on the failure. When you get into an organizational structure, you can't have everybody running around an organization failing. You have to have standardization and production occurring. And do you get involved in actually trying to keep a failure mentality, I failed saying that, so. Failure mentality in an organization where you actually embrace it, bringing the information back in. Because what I've found, as soon as an organization starts to grow, they don't embrace the failure of the person in the street or the sales or trying to continue to innovate. They try to standardize and keep the production going and not looking to continue to push the edge of the organization to make it grow.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've come to find is that there are a lot of the companies that are actually very, very successful, so like Google's and Facebook's and things like this, they really do promote this sense of just exploring and failing and just learning, and it's a really rich environment when you can do that. Obviously, you can't have your CFO failing, or a lot of the other components to the organization. But I think creatively speaking, if you want your creative team to be failing and creating a culture in a company that promotes that.
One final question. Ken.
Thank you for being here. How are you with your children? Because I'm not afraid personally to fail, and I've done it many times, and my parents let me and my brother both kind of just do whatever and make a mistake, but I can't stand to watch my kids go through that. How are you with your kids?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because my wife and I have very different opinions on this. My kids have come to learn that whenever they need anything done, they go straight to her, because they know she will do it for them. And we've had a number of fairly extensive conversations about how you need to stop doing that so that they can learn how to do that. My 14-year-old son needs to know how to make a peanut butter sandwich. And if he fails at it, then let him get stomach flu or something.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have a lot of unanswered questions myself. I think it's an interesting way to be thinking about how do you create something, and how do you even prepare yourself mentally and emotionally to fail. So, an inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We are delighted you could be a part of our club today. We have something for you. It is a certificate that says it's in honor of you being our distinguished speaker today, July 19th. $1,000 donation has been made in your name, an LA5 Scholarship Fund. Grant, you need to know that this club is incredibly generous, giving over $200,000 last year to high-need, high-performing LAUSD students who are going to college. So my guess there's some innovators even coming your way. So this is in your honor. Thank you for being here today.